President Trump says he can do whatever he wants with the Justice Department. Making the comments during an impromptu interview with the New York Times, asked whether the Hillary Clinton email investigation should be reopened. He said, quote, "I have the absolute right to do what I want with the Justice Department, but for the purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter." Evan Perez is out front tonight. And Evan, set the record straight for us. What can and can't the president do with the Justice Department?
Right. Well, Poppy, the fact is the president controls the Justice Department in the sense that it's part of the executive branch. Right. It reports to him. He hires and has the right to fire the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, the political appointees there. But, you know, when it comes to, say, ordering an investigation of his political opponents, which is kind of what the conversation that was part of the context there, you know, there is a limit to what he can do, simply because there has to be a legal basis for doing such an investigation. And if he tried to force the Justice Department, the FBI, to carry out an investigation of his political opponents for which there was no legal basis, I think he'd get a lot of pushback from the career people there. He'd get pushback from the Attorney General, certainly Jeff Sessions. I think that's part of his frustration. You're hearing a president who is used to being a CEO, who's used to being able to tell people what to do, and that's a limitation that he has to deal with now as president. And that's one of the we've heard from him repeatedly, his frustration with Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department, because he has seen repeatedly, and with James Comey, the FBI director that he fired, he's seen repeatedly that there's a limitation to his powers as president.
Indeed, it's very different than running a private organization, not even a public company where you're responsible to a public board. Very different, certainly, now. Thank you very much, Evan. Have a great weekend. Happy New Year to you, too. Thanks. Out front now, former ethics lawyer under President George W. Bush, Richard Painter, and former White House counsel under President Nixon, John Dean. Gentlemen, nice to have you with me. John, let me begin with you. The president says, I can do whatever I want with the Justice Department. You say?
I don't think he can. The Justice Department is a creature of Congress. It was actually created in 1870 after the Civil War. And they laid out what the rules are, and the president's job under the Constitution is to faithfully execute the laws. That doesn't mean he can read or write the laws and do what he wants.
Richard, this comment from the president is interesting because it somewhat contradicts what he said about the department, about the FBI in a radio interview last month. Let's listen to that.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department. I'm not supposed to be involved with the FBI. I'm not supposed to be doing the kind of things that I would love to be doing. And I'm very frustrated by it.
Notable, though, that he did lament over not being able to do those things. What's your read overall on this?
Well, I think he picked the wrong country to be president of if he thinks he has absolute power to run the Justice Department however he wants. That may be the way it works in Putin's Russia and other places. That's not the way it works here. There are laws, and he has sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution of the United States. He has the power to remove the Attorney General, to remove all of his appointees in the Justice Department. But he does not have the right, the legal right, to use that power to either get the Justice Department to investigate his political opponents, which is the way business is done in dictatorships. That's not the way we do it in the United States. He has no right to do that. He also has no right to remove the Attorney General or pressure the Attorney General to fire Robert Mueller, to stop the Justice Department from investigating the White House and members of his campaign who are currently members of his administration, some of them. So he may not obstruct justice as President of the United States. He is not above the law, and that's the bottom line. He is not above the law. He is not a king. He is a president in a constitutional system of government.
And to be clear here, you know, Mueller's boss, Rod Rosenstein, testified to Congress, you know, John, as you know, that no one has asked him to fire Mueller. He doesn't see any reason to fire Mueller. One of the most stunning things of this interview was that the president said he thinks Mueller is going to treat him fairly. This at the same time, John, as you know, a growing number of his fellow Republicans have been attacking Mueller's integrity and the investigation. Here are just some of those attacks.
If everyone was dismissed from the Mueller team who was anti-Trump, you wouldn't have anybody left.
Mueller, I have said since day one, since he was appointed, he's bad news. He's out for a scalp. He would love to get Trump's scalp.
This has really spun far beyond what Mr. Mueller's authority should have been limited to, and we have to bring it back in.
What do you think, John? Do you think the president wants those Republicans to stop those attacks on Mueller and hear him on the fairness comment, or not exactly?
I think his comments were pretty clear. He was throwing signals, friendly signals towards Mueller, but also encouraging those who are being critical of the investigation to continue being so. He called his base strong. He gave them praise for what they were doing. He certainly didn't rebuke them, but rather was sending, in essence, a message to Mueller that if you exonerate me, I'll think you're fair.
So also, John, just building on what we've seen in terms of the reaction to those comments about the Justice Department, et cetera, former Attorney General Eric Holder fired back on Twitter today. Here's what he wrote. Wrong, dangerous. Trump doesn't have absolute rights with the DOJ, but women and men there absolutely do have the duty to follow the Constitution, the rule of law, not a man. Career DOJ people have absolute right to defy illegal orders, and they will. I know it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's a very accurate statement of the way the Department of Justice works. I once worked in that department. It's a storied department. It has really wonderful career people who do want to uphold the law, who are public servants, and they're not going to hear a president giving orders that are contrary to the regulations and rules that they are really have pledged to follow. So I think Holder has just nailed it and told the president how he should be thinking.
I mean, Richard, also staying on the Eric Holder beat for just a moment, the president brought up Eric Holder, the former attorney general. He talked about being upset about his own attorney general, Jeff Sessions, recusing himself from the Russia probe. And then he said this, I don't want to get into loyalty, but I will tell you, I will say this, Holder protected President Obama, totally protected him. When you look at the things they did and that Holder protected the president, I have great respect for that, I'll be honest. When you initially read that he clearly sees part of the job of the Attorney General as to protect the Commander-in-Chief, what did you think?
Well, to protect the rule of law. And what President Trump is doing there is casting dispersions on President Obama without any specifics in terms of what they did. There is absolutely no evidence of serious law breaking during the Obama administration. There were one or two scandals I kept my eye on during those 8 years. I was the chief White House ethics lawyer under President Bush. We had our scandals there. But President Obama did not need protection from investigations because President Obama didn't break the law, and he didn't have people working for him who were breaking the law. And that's the problem here, is that President Trump thinks that the Justice Department's job is to protect him from investigations into his campaign and into members of his administration, and indeed of himself, because he engaged in obstruction of justice when he fired James Comey. That's not the role of the Justice Department to cover for the president.
You believe, just to be clear, that's your belief.
It's in the Constitution.
Okay.
Well, I think it's very clear in the statutes and in the Constitution, that we do not have a system where the Justice Department functions to politically protect the president and his officials if they're engaged in illegal conduct.
I'm just saying it's your belief that the president obstructed justice. That is part of what Mueller's team is currently investigating right now.